Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm Melvin Edwards, chairman of the Planning and Economic Development Committee for the City Council. I want to thank all of you for your time, and I appreciate you spending and sharing your talents with me today. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the transfer of some properties that are controlled by the Springfield Redevelopment Authority and are going to be transferred over to the city for the purposes of putting out an RFP for development of single-family housing. If everybody could just go around, we'll be as informal as we can. The committee members today and present are myself, Councilor Perez, and Councilor Letterman. We will be the voting members of the committee, but as guests and members of the council present are also Councilor Govan and Councilor Whitfield. If our Tina and Ms. Amanda, if you could all just kind of introduce yourselves with your title, greatly appreciated. Start with Amanda.
Amanda Pham. I'm the executive director of the Springfield Redevelopment Authority.
And
hi, Tina Quagliato Sullivan. I am the director of disaster recovery and compliance.
And hi, I'm Jerry McCafferty. I'm the director of housing.
thank you, everybody. And I believe we have Paul Tuttle as well. And we thank him for being here. Tina, I'm going to let you start off because you have the description of the properties that are we're here to discuss. And just if you could just beg me one more moment. And I believe I did acknowledge Councilor Letterman as being a member of the committee, as a voting member, and Councilor Davila is now signing in as well, I believe. But Tina, please, at your leisure, please. And we welcome Councilor Davila as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Sure. Hi, welcome. What we're here to talk about is the transfer of, it's actually 5 properties from the SRA to the city of Springfield. One of the properties, Eastside Dwight Street, you'll notice on the agenda, there's 2 parcel IDs. It's actually 2 vacant lots that'll be combined into one for the purposes of building one home there. So the idea is the city would then take ownership of the properties. We would put them out for an RFP for the development of an affordable single-family home ownership opportunities on each of the properties.
Tina, could you just run down quickly the addresses or all of the properties, please?
Sure. The first one is Eastside Pine Street, parcel 173. That is in the 6 Corners neighborhood. The second one is Northside Marble Street, parcel 19. That is in South End. And then the third and fourth, technically, is Eastside Dwight Street. That's parcels 284 and 282. Those are in the North End. And then Eastside Richelieu Street, parcel 14, that is in the South End neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
And I should also say that the city has consulted with the neighborhoods on each of these, and our understanding from the neighborhood councils that they are in support of the plan.
Thank you. Tina, could you expound or expand a little bit and talk about, is any money available with these RFPs for these properties?
Yeah, so our plan would be to make both a combination of disaster recovery, HUD disaster recovery, and HUD home funds available for the development of the properties. And that funding would really cover the gap between the construction costs and the sale price. And I should say the sale price on each of these properties would be capped at an affordable rate.
And the definition of an affordable rate would be generally?
It's somewhere right around 200,000. So, and I should say, I'm sure the counselors are aware that lots of folks sort of in the low moderate income brackets have been priced out of our current housing market. So we're hopeful that this will address some of that. And you want me just to sort of speak to sort of how we came up with the sites? Is that?
Sure, yes, yes, I think that way is appropriate. Thank you.
Sure. So, these 4 properties are in areas where the city has ongoing similar projects happening, or is in the South End where we have some property and we had done a significant amount of redevelopment work down there, and we are trying to sort of finish that up and fix some of the vacant lots that are still unaddressed down there. So the one on Pine Street is fairly close to Central Street, where we've done sort of similar homeownership development. The one in the North End is very close to where the city recently just is working on selling 2 similar homeownership opportunities. And then the other 2, like I said, are in the South End, where we have done a significant amount of development work and are hoping to sort of finish that up.
Would you mind explaining for the guests and the counselors as well, the process for accessing the RFP, and also what some of the criteria that when we do, I've been involved with this for quite a while, and I've done it several times. But for anybody who is here, that we have a couple of counselors that may not, they're newly elected. They may be very aware of the process, but if you could explain any details that would help them, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So what will happen is the city will release an RFP for the sale and development of the properties. At the time, we will also say to developers that when they submit their budgets, they should include a request for public funding. We'll make a certain amount of public funding available in the RFP. And then they're available to the public. We try to do outreach. We have, and Jerry can also speak to this if need be, we have tried to attract developers to do this kind of work. It has been an ongoing challenge for us to get developers to do this. It is, the paperwork around utilizing federal funds for development can be cumbersome. So we do, I have previously, when we put out this type of funding to try and attract more developers to the process, I have done a technical assistance workshop in conjunction with the deputy director in housing to try to walk developers through what that process looks like and how they could apply. I anticipate we would probably do something similar here to try and attract developers to participate in the program. And then again, we would accept proposals. A committee reviews them against the criteria laid out in the RFP. That criteria typically involves looking at what the plan for redevelopment would be, what their budget is to make sure it's feasible and reasonable and in line with HUD regulations, and to look at some of their development experience to ensure that they would have the capacity to complete this type of project. That committee then makes recommendations to the mayor about the selection, and typically the mayor concurs with those recommendations, and then that developer would be awarded preferred developer status, and then we would sort of work with them around the details around budgeting and getting to contract, so that they have to submit certain things. We also likely will lay out for them what their disposition process should look like to the subsequent home buyer, to make sure that that process is open and transparent to any potential home buyers. And so that's generally what the process should look like. I should also say this time around, we are hoping to make this a little bit easier for the developers, in that we are hoping to work with home designers before these properties go out to bid through the RFP process, so that we have set plans for what developers would have to build on these properties. In the past, we have said to developers, you come to us with your plans and your designs, and that does create something of a lag between the award of preferred developer status to actual transfer, because there's typically some back and forth between the planning department, if the properties are in a historic district, between the historic commission, and lots of tweaking of plans and budgets. So we're sort of hoping that by laying out the designs on the front end, it will make it easier for developers, and also will make the ultimate transfer process a lot quicker.
Okay, I have some questions from the counselors, but just finally, could you just speak as to the time frame of, I believe you stated to me that you want to get this before the council for March. Could you give us an idea of when these RFPs, including the design work, will be made available to the public?
Yeah, I think we're probably thinking, assuming all goes as planned, sometime this late spring, early summer. We're hoping to catch some part of this year's construction season, but most definitely next year's construction season, because the DR funds do have an expiration date of September of 2023.
Okay. Councilor Whitfield, followed by Councilor Letterman, followed by Councilor Davila. Councilor Whitfield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tina, how long does a developer have to build these houses?
So like I just mentioned, for the ones in the south end and six corners, we would be looking at probably a year from transfer. Those DR funds expire in September of 2023. So we are,
disaster recovery fund?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. So assuming Congress doesn't give another extension on that, we have to have those funds fully expended by that deadline. Otherwise, the Treasury sweeps them. So we're looking at a pretty fast turnaround if we can.
Okay. And the DR funds, how much of the cost of the build does that provide?
So it provides basically everything between the difference between the development cost and the ultimate sale price. So it sort of depends on what the total development cost is and what the ultimate sale price is. That's what determines what the subsidy is.
Can you explain that to me a little bit more? Like, what does the sale price have to do with the DR funds? Like, I'm not understanding that piece.
Sure. So basically, there's a total development cost for the project, right? That's the overall cost to build the house. That includes the developer fee. It includes their acquisition costs. Then the sale price, so the ultimate sale price covers a portion of that, right? That's the market cost to support the project. And then the gap, sort of the difference between that ultimate, the total development cost of what it costs to develop the property and ultimate market, what the market can support, so is what the subsidy ends up being.
Okay. So if I sell the property and I make, like, let's say 30,000 more than it cost to build, right? So 30,000. I don't know. I'm still not understanding like how that relates. I guess I don't.
So here's the thing. I think imagine total development cost is.
Oh, I think I get it. Let me see if I'm right. Okay. So because it has to be low income, sold to low income families, so the market might be 130,000, but the developer can only sell it for 100,000. So the 30,000 would be the subsidy. That kind of.
Yeah, although the numbers are typically kind of different than that, right? So the total development cost might be 350,000, and the house would likely the cap would likely be, 200,000. So then, right, that what makes that up? So somewhere around 150,000. Depending again on what those costs are, that's what the subsidy ends up.
Okay, and that subsidy goes to the developer.
Well, so the developer typically lays out all of the costs, and then the city reimburses up to that subsidy amount. And then when the sale closes, whatever costs are left that haven't been covered by the subsidy amount, that gets paid out to the developer, and then the remainder comes back to the city. If there's any.
Okay. And then, so in a normal situation without the DR fund, how long does the developer have to build those houses?
I mean, it's fairly similar. I think it's typically around a year. I think it, again, it sort of also depends, I just sort of mentioned how between when a developer is designated and when the property actually transfers, there's a whole bunch of steps that typically happen. They refine their plans, we refine the budgets, we do an environmental review process. So it does sort of depend on where those things fall. We're hoping to eliminate some of that time with this by putting out the plans first. Honestly, we do think it will simplify things for the developers as well. And we believe it's probably in line with what HUD would like to see, to make understanding of the bidding process more simplified when their auditors ultimately come in and look at the projects.
Okay, and do you have information sessions to explain all that you just explained to me, because it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. So in the past, we have done technical assistance workshops for interested developers. I will say the last one that we did right when an RFP went out, we had a really good turnout, and we ended up only receiving 2 proposals from developers. So, I think once folks sort of understand the paperwork and what goes into it, it can turn them away. But we've tried to eliminate as much of that as possible, but understanding that these are federal funds and there will ultimately be auditors looking at them, there's just some stuff we can't make go away.
Thank you, Tina. I appreciate it. Thank you, Counselor.
Sure, Counselor Whitfield. Counselor Letterman, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of my questions were addressed by Counselor Whitfield. I think the only follow-up clarification I had was relative to ensuring that the numbers that are submitted in the beginning stay consistent. And I just want to make sure that I understand that, number one, they undergo an audit afterwards, but number two, they are only reimbursed for up to what they initially submit. So there's not an opportunity for them to, inflate the numbers and then underspend on the project. Does that make sense?
Right. No, it does make sense. So I should talk to that. So HUD requires that there be cost reasonableness for every project and that we demonstrate that. So not only do we review the budgets in-house, they also go to a third party who also reviews them. So it's sort of a third party consulting firm that takes those numbers, plugs them into market average, looks at all the proposed square footage and things like that to ensure that those costs are reasonable. And that happens once we sort of develop the final budget around the plan. So there sometimes is some tweaking of budget as plans change. And that's sort of to be expected in these sorts of things. But yeah, no, they're only reimbursed for what they spend. They have to submit backup documentation to support those costs. It can't exceed the budget that ultimately goes into the contract, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance that creates a change order. But typically we haven't had it go over those contracted amounts. And we do also work a contingency into the budgets to make sure, and that's a reasonable contingency that is based on market contingencies that are typically permissible, and the third party consultant also reviews those contingencies. So that's all sort of worked into the process. And I should say our in-house review typically involves myself, Jerry McCafferty, and Bobby DeMusis, who's her deputy. We all review them. We compare them to past projects and make sure that, there's nothing that looks funny or costs that do not seem unreasonable.
And Tina, what's the deciding factors in the RFP ranking? What categories are you looking at?
So it's typically the developer capacity. So that's looking at their development experience, what sort of team do they have to complete this type of project? Obviously, we're looking for some level of experience. And then we look at their obviously their proposed budget, what their plans are, and do those plans align with sort of the neighborhood revitalization goals. We do look at the purchase price, although I will say, as is typical with most property development RFPs, the plan, the overall project budget, what the subsidy will need to look like that goes into the project, and the developer's capacity all tend to factor in more than the actual offer price.
Okay. All right, and that was my questions. The last thing I would just ask, Tina, do you have like a maximum amount of disaster recovery funds that can be put forward? I know the subsidy price will change proposal to proposal, but what's the ballpark amount?
I think at this point we have around I think it's $1 million, but I'd have to double check that exact amount with Kathy Bono. Okay. And okay. Our intention is to sort of plug in whatever we don't have with DR funds with home funds.
That's fine. And I think that, you're feeding two birds with one seed in some regard, because not only is the cost of housing up significantly, but when you look at new construction, the building material cost is so sky high. So, yes, to be asking for affordable new construction without subsidy is a pretty high bar. And so, I think it's a great idea, and appreciate you bringing it out. Thanks.
Councilor Davila, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Tina. Good afternoon, Tina. I have a clarifying question, Tina. When you said the disaster recovery funds, are we talking about ARPA or a whole different pot of money?
No, we're actually talking about funding that came in following the tornado in 2011.
Okay. We still have money left?
We do still have money left. It's all been allocated. We're just spending down those allocations.
Okay, so this is not from the Springfield buyback or no? So this is an old program going back to the tornado era. Yes. Okay, thank you, Tina. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Pham, did you want to add anything, or before I at least ask? Representing the Springfield Redevelopment Authority.
Yeah, Tina did a great job catching up. And I mean, the SRA is glad to help the city in the expansion of that program to help with the housing. All these properties are already owned by the SRA within urban renewal areas, and they meet the objectives of the plan. So we're excited to see that progress.
Would either of the other councilors have any questions or comments? Councilor Govan, I see your hand kind of waving.
Thank you, Councilor. I just wanted to again comment. I was going to ask the same questions that were asked by the previous councilors, and I just think that this is a great idea. One thought that I had, and I know that Tina probably addressed this a little bit, as far as the people who can apply for the RFPs, the developers. I really would love for us to be able to focus on local developers, of course, developers of color, women-owned developers, and see if we can find a way. I know you said that a lot of people come to the informational sessions, but only 2 proposals were submitted. So I'm wondering if there's just some way that we could maybe, find a way to help them kind of be encouraged to submit a proposal at least, and get the help that they need to make it successful. But thank you so much for this. This is very important, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Councilor.
Sure. Councilor Perez?
Sorry.
Would you like to comment, or you have any questions?
Yeah, I was part of seeing at the one at 11 Jefferson, and being part of the lottery with the families that acquired those property. The unique part of it is that I see more people coming in from our city and buying into our city from the city, which that's very important. And I want to thank the team. We had the lottery back in November, and the people that acquired the property, one on Dwight Street and the other at Jefferson. I was part of it, and I mean, this is a great project. Kudos to the team. Thank you.
Attorney D'Souza, you've not had a chance to say anything. Would you like to offer any comment? Lisa?
Do you mean Jerry?
Jerry, I'm sorry. Jerry, I'm sorry. I'm having one of those moments. You know, it's the Valentine's Day pressure, you know.
No problem. I was thinking, is she here? Attorney DeSouza? No, nothing really to add. Really, Tina has said everything about this. But I guess the one thing would be just, it is filling in some places that have called for development. So there is this piece that is neighborhood stabilization as well as creation of affordable housing and creation of homeownership opportunities. So it's sort of hitting many goals at one time.
I see Council Letterman, your hand is up again. Would you like to comment again?
No, Mr. Chairman, just at the appropriate time, I'd make a motion that we refer this to the full council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I want to thank everybody, and I really appreciate all the questions. They were very informative. To kind of dug into it. And to build on what Council Govan, just as a point of reference, and Council Whitfield, Letterman, and even Council Perez, everybody on the thing understand. We've been trying for years to get more involvement, particularly around minority contractors, female-owned business owners, and developers. It's always been harder than it should have been. Or should be, for get them to participate, and we are willing to work with them and advise them any way we can to encourage them. But it is an arduous process. I've had the neighborhood and ward in which I represent has been very successful over the years. We were in the path of the tornado, so many of the housing developments have come through this source, and I've heard both sides of it. I've reaped the benefits of the work that's been done, but I've also heard from the developers on how arduous the journey can be. But it's well worth it, and the neighborhood really benefits once these things are completed. And I'm eager and looking forward to supporting developments in Indian Orchard and other parts of the city, all across the city north end. And it's not exclusive to any one area, but these funds obviously came through the tornado. So that being said, Council Letterman, I believe you are putting forth a motion of a positive recommendation. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion has been made and second, and the voting members of the council, all agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any other questions or comments before we bring this meeting to a close? Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate you sharing and the questions that you asked, and to the team. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure. Thank you, everybody. Be safe.
Hi, Jerry.
You.
Happy
Bye.
Valentine's to everybody.
Happy
Thank you.
Valentine's Day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay.